Good evening and welcome to the League of Women Voters Presents. My name is Laura Wegman. I'm filling in tonight for Jim Robertson. Tonight's topic will be small business in today's economy. I have three panelists with me tonight who have different areas of experience related to small business. I'll introduce, starting here from my immediate left, this is Keith McLaughlin of the Bank of Missouri. Then we have Anna Chippendale of Focus on Learning and Chris Bouchard of the Missouri Small Business and Technology Development Centers. I'll start and just have each of you explain a little bit about what your connection is with small business and what you do. Keith, we'll start with you.
I'm with the Bank of Missouri here in Columbia, and we have a dedicated SBA lending platform. That's a small business lending platform. And our bank is business focused. So every day I go to work, I do business loans. That's it.
All right, Anna?
I own a learning center called Focus on Learning Center. I'm in my 28th year, and I started the business largely because I couldn't find a job. And it's still trucking along, and it's been quite a ride and a pretty interesting experience.
All right, Chris?
I'm Chris Bouchard, and I'm the Interim State Director for the Missouri Small Business and Technology Development Centers. And we are a statewide program that's funded federally by the SBA and then funded locally through the universities and some other local funds that we obtain. And we provide business services to small businesses as defined by the SBA, both one-on-one counseling services and training programs to help entrepreneurs.
All right. And I wanted to ask you to start out, since you're the one here who owns a small business, and you mentioned you got into it because you couldn't find a job somewhere else.
Quite literally, yes.
And I expect that experience is not uncommon. Could you talk a little bit about how you decided on this type of business and how you got started?
Well, I'm fundamentally a teacher. I love teaching. That is my passion and my love. And I think I came into it by the back door because I was involved in learning centers both at the University of Missouri when I was a graduate student and at Central Methodist College. And I'm a reading specialist and work with students of varying, I'm also a member of the Gifted Association. I cover the spectrum. And I just decided to open the business because it gave me such an incredible opportunity to work with students of all different ages, all different needs, all different backgrounds. And it was my experience in setting up a learning center. I happened to be the first specialist in Missouri and set it up at Central Methodist. But I thought, hey, why not? If I could do it for the colleges, why not do it for myself? So I thought I'd give myself 2 years, and if I folded, I folded. But I was very lucky.
Well, that didn't happen. That's great.
Didn't happen. Yep.
Chris, I wanted to ask you just kind of a general question on this topic, and that is, what role does small business play right now in terms of job creation at a time when that's a really big topic on people's minds, coming out of a recession? And I think that entrepreneurship has been something that's really been at the top of a lot of people's minds in terms of economic development. What can you say about the role of small businesses in job creation?
Oh, that's a good question. And I happen to bring some statistics to talk about that. Small businesses are the key to job creation, and some research, and what I have are some numbers here from the Lowe Foundation, and if you want to look them up online, it's on the website, youreconomy.org. And in that I just printed off for the 10-year period from 2000 to 2010, the only sector that had a net creation of jobs was the small business sector. And nationwide, for companies with less than 10 employees, created somewhere over 200% increase in jobs in that sector. The large companies actually had a negative net increase of jobs. And then here in Missouri, it's almost identical in trend. In Missouri, the self-employed had an increase of 157% in that time frame, and companies with less than 10 employees had an increase of 33%. All other sectors, and how they list them here, is between 10 and 99 employees, 100 to 500, and over 500. Every one of those sectors had negative growth rates in job creation. And so recovering from a recession, and even prior to 2007, I looked up the statistics for that time period too, and the trends were very similar, that even in good times, the job creation, net job creation was occurring in the small business sector. So your question, how important are small businesses? There are the numbers. That's
Yeah.
where it's happening.
Essential, right. Keith, from your end, you're helping people maybe get started by getting the SBA loans. Who can get an SBA loan?
Well, there's certain basic requirements to get an SBA loan, and we'll just assume that you're going to start a new business. You've got to have knowledge of that industry. That's a requirement. You have to have someone who has a good credit history, because character is the #1 issue, and sometimes that's our only alternative is character, because a lot of small businesses don't have much in the way of collateral to pledge to secure a loan. So we have to look at them as people that are good people of good character and can pay the loans. And they have to have some money. We call it skin in the game. Yeah. For example, if someone wanted to borrow $100,000 to start a business, we'd be looking at them to invest their part, $20,000 to $25,000 in that venture. But a business plan is a basic criteria. When they come to us and want to start a business, the first thing I do is I send them over to Chris's shop, because he has the experts over there, and I tell them I want you to go over there and have them make you bankable. And then when they get done with them, they've either decided to go ahead and apply for a loan to get a business, or they've said, you know, I don't think I want to do this after all. Mm-hmm. So that's all cleared, and when they come back to us, they're ready to borrow the money and ready to go into business.
Okay, so they've perhaps made a business plan with some help over there, and so they're more prepared.
Yes.
To actually get the financing then.
Let me add just one quick
Sure.
thing. When we were talking about it coming in, about half our loans are to females, women-owned businesses. And my experience has been that women seem to become more prepared, and they seem to be somewhat of a better credit risk sometimes. I don't know why that is. I think the preparation is they're more detailed about what they do, but we do a lot of loans for women going into business.
Chris, have you seen more women trying to go into small business in recent years? Is that a trend you've noticed?
I can't say I've noticed that trend.
Yeah.
It is common now. So I couldn't tell you whether it's growing or declining, but it is.
It's growing.
You think so?
It's absolutely growing, yeah. And I was pretty active. I've been not in the last couple of years, but in the women business owners community in Columbia. And there is just a vibrant group of women in Columbia who own businesses, and they're doing extraordinarily well. They really are. And I'm kind of interested in what you said about women starting their business. You know, I think the thing that I noticed when I started is that women also have the attitude that they'll do everything and anything. They're not, you know, we tend to be much tighter with our money and our budgets. I really think that's a generalization that's fair. And we're also more willing to do the oddball things and you know, even do the windows kind of thing if you have to, and just kind of give it our all. And I don't know whether that's temperament, training, combination, but it's true. But I know that the trend right before I stopped attending those meetings was that there were more women business owners in Columbia than men. That was about 3 years ago. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So, Chris, I wanted to ask you, following up on the financing question, if debt financing isn't an option, what are other ways that people can capitalize getting a small business going or keeping it going?
Well, banks have certain criteria that they need to meet, and it's usually debt financing collateralized in some way. And then, of course, other ways is to raise your own money, saving it, and that's very important. That's part of the character evaluation, is that you're able to handle money and show that you're willing to put something aside so that you can fulfill a dream that you have. But if you are needing money, that debt financing isn't going to be available to you, and that's usually for companies that are experiencing very rapid growth. And so they're looking for other kinds of capitalization of their business. And typically that'll be some type of equity injection and going out and finding investors to invest in the company. And there's several different ways of doing that. And so here in Columbia, there's an angel network that has made some money available to those kinds of companies. And you'll find somebody that is, you'll do a pitch to them, you explain what you're doing, what the market is, the potential, and a whole number of things that are evaluated. And if you find somebody interested in investing in you, they'll talk further with you and work out the deal. So equity injection is another way for companies to find financing.
Okay.
A lot of times we have people come to us that's kind of played around with start a business and they've got part of their equipment already in place. Maybe it's they've got some inventory and they got tools and they got some office chairs and desks, and all that counts as equity towards the requirement for their financing.
Okay.
So,
I know that the Bank of Missouri does a lot of small business lending, correct?
they do.
Obviously there's some benefit to the bank and also probably some risk, but how does a bank get very active in the SBA lending? What are the motivations there?
When I had a business of my own at one time called America's Business Brokers, so I had to deal with banks all the time. And I was surprised to learn that a lot of banks don't want to do small business loans. And the reason for that is it's among the highest risk lending a bank can do. So if they don't have people in place that have expert knowledge of lending, and they don't have something like the SBA program to support that, typically they'll sort of stay away from it. Banks, a lot of them will decide they're going to be small business lenders, and then that employee quits or gets promoted, and then it stops again. And that was an issue that the president of our bank and I addressed years ago. We said we got to have a dedicated small business lending platform. It has to be staffed full time. It can't be part time. And for that reason, our programs have been very successful. We've always been the top lender in this market, small business lending. And that's what it takes to do it. It takes expertise, it takes commitment on the part of the lender. It also has to bring value to both parties. The borrower has to get value from the loan, start their business, and the bank has to get value. They have to earn a profit. You know, we're a business too, just like the person borrowing the money. So the SBA program, with that, we're able to do that.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you, have you seen changes? Would you say that it's easier or more difficult now running a small business in today's climate than it was when you first started or throughout the years?
I don't know. I think my business is so specialized. You know, we work with students of all ages who have specific learning needs. We are geared to making sure that, I mean, my personal interest is making sure that all students are prepared for post-secondary, you know, college. And most of the students we work with are college. We do a lot of ACT prep. The economy, in some ways, it influences, for example, the ACT. I think parents are more willing to pay for ACT prep right now because there's an immediate payoff. But I think we live in a community where education is valued, so I think my business is probably a little bit more buffered from the economy. And there's the sense also that in a downsized economy, education becomes an even greater a commodity, and more important and more essential a need. So I would say that the economy per se has, I can't say that it has impacted me as much. I think the issues have been pretty much the same. Staff, my basic issues have always been finding really good staff, and marketing is my low watershed. I don't know, I just can't seem to get that right. So.
How large of a staff do you have?
I have a full-time office manager and a half-time accountant, and then I have 9 part-time teachers at this point, who are independent contractors.
Any of you can answer this, although maybe Chris, you would have a good sense of it. Has there been any kind of shift in recent years in the types of small businesses you're seeing be either more successful or more popular that people are trying to get started? Do you see trends over time? And if so, what are you seeing right now?
I think in the small business sector, the trend is probably moving away from retail and more into the service area. Sometimes it's you do see rapid growth in companies that have unique intellectual property that the big boxes haven't caught on to. But in this economy, anything that hits the market retail very quickly becomes a commodity. The margins very quickly are very small, and so to be able to specialize in small business, it's becoming more and more difficult. So like her business, it's not retail, it's more service oriented. And so it's much harder for a big box to come in and do that kind of work. So service type businesses probably is where most small businesses now are getting focused and find their sweet spot and be able to make a decent living doing that kind of work. Retail is tough.
I think it's important to note that the internet has changed the landscape of small business. Last year, the internet produced $1 trillion worth of sales. In the United States alone, we did $384 billion in sales over the internet.
Wow.
And I would venture to say everyone sitting here has been on the internet and bought something. But if you just stop and think about how the internet has changed things, just go back as near as 2004. There was no Facebook. Twitter was just a sound. Cloud was in the sky. LinkedIn was a prison. 4G was an apartment number. App was what you filled out to get a job. And Skype, well, that was just for most of us a typo. All that's a new language and a new way of doing business today, and it has its impact on both large and small businesses. Large businesses have been able to take advantage of that to some extent because they're big enough and have the resources to react to that. Somebody in a small business doesn't, and that makes it difficult.
Yeah, I think that maybe speaks to what Chris was saying as well about retail. That's easier to duplicate online, whereas a service, you may need someone there where you're living, and so it's less easy to duplicate that in an internet setting. Maybe, I don't know if either Keith or Chris can give any examples. They don't have to be specific, or they can be specific. Success stories that you've helped with in this area over the past few years.
I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I do have a good one.
Go right ahead.
We had there was a manufacturing company in a small community nearby. It was owned by a large corporation out of Arkansas, and they decided to pull out of the market. This company employed 55 people. Small town, 55 people would leave a huge hole in the employment there. They're going to leave the equipment. They quit that product line, actually. 3 of the employees, and one of them was an engineer in that plant, said, "Can we buy the business?" And the company said, sure. They cut them a good price because they didn't want to move the equipment out. They went to half the banks in the county and happened to come to us, and we decided to try it with them. And we got SBDC involved. Thank goodness for them. Together, we were able to finance the purchase of that business, and they brought back 35 employees right away who were out of a job. But one of the heartwarming things about that was, it was a month or two after that, a lady come into our bank, probably in her 50s. As I was walking by, she was opening a checking account, and she stopped me and she said, give me her name, and said, "I'm with that company. I'm by myself. My husband died a few years ago. My children are not near here, and I was going to be out on the street without that job." And she broke down and cried and said, you can't even begin to tell you how much we appreciate what you did. So there's really a good side to this thing of loaning money sometimes, but in small towns, it's extremely important that somebody go in there and help these companies survive and stay alive. And that's one of the things SBA and Chris's shop does.
Absolutely. Do you have any other things to add
Some
to
examples? Well,
Sure.
first of all, I got to be careful we don't even talk about our clients by name.
Sure.
So I have to have permission to be able to even mention their names. And so every year in January we have an annual conference, and we recognize a good number of companies from around the state. And I don't know if I brought that out, that we have offices all around the state. It's a university-based program, and so almost all of the public universities house one of our delivery offices. And we're part of University of Missouri Extension, and so we have 16 offices and county extension offices around the state as well. And so that's our delivery method. And just some examples of companies that were recognized just this January. We've got one called Greenfield Energy Group in Lone Jack, which is not exactly a big city either. And what occurred there is the owners turned the company around, achieving $2.5 million in sales in the year after they engaged with the SBTDC. Henson Enterprises in West Plains. This company secured contracts of new facilities, preserving, and this is kind of the same line that Keith was talking about, 20 machinist jobs and entering new markets to enjoy multi-million-dollar revenues from government contracting and new firms. 3D Imaging in Joplin. We helped a number of companies after the tornado in Joplin. This company wasn't directly affected, but the person that started this company had to dig herself out of the rubble of her home. And she decided to start this 3D imaging, and the main target is for expecting women to be able to get very clear pictures of their unborn children. Right here in Columbia, Mark Hall Cabinetry went through a number of analysis with our counselors here in town, financial and extensive market research, and was able to increase their online presence and find new pricing points and increase their sales through some of the techniques that they learned through the SBTDC. So those are some quick examples. Do you want to talk a little bit more about another success story?
Well, I had a wonderful experience with you, and had about 4 years ago, I had my whole business plan evaluated and analyzed, and I got some very good pointers, some very useful pointers. So I speak very highly of the services you offer and recommend them to anyone who is starting or is actually even running a small business. I think we're very lucky to have that kind of presence in Columbia. We really are.
Right.
Another example, to just give kind of a spectrum of the types of companies that can be served. The university does a lot of research, and they find some very interesting things. And here's a company called Elemental Enzymes, and these were in postdocs that were working on some research that helps clean up contaminated water sources. And the intellectual property that they created at the university now is being licensed to these two well, they're now doctorates, but that they worked on this program as a postdoctorate right here in Columbia. And so this is something to help clean up contaminated water as their product. And so the point there is the type of businesses, anywhere from a manufacturing company to a learning, somebody that provides teaching and learning to students, to someone that's developing IP that can be licensed out of the university. So there's a broad range of types of businesses that are served by the SBTDC.
Okay, those are great examples. What would you tell someone? I'm sorry, did you have something to add?
Oh,
okay.
That's right.
What would you tell someone coming in to look at starting a small business? What are the most important things they need to think about or assess when they're making the decision to do that? Is it related to finances or to their personal experience? What are some of the most important factors to consider?
Well, Keith kind of touched on this a little bit. But there's a number of things that really need to be considered. And they've really got to, first of all, it can be a very emotional thing. You know, oh, I know this will work. It's just the greatest thing. And I'd say just sit down with the numbers, you know, and think it through about what kind of money do you need to make a living, first of all. And then from that number, you know, what kind of sales are you going to have to be able to produce that kind of income that you can take home and live off of. And it's really surprising that people don't go through a process to just identify the numbers. And then once you get numbers saying, I need to be at this kind of volume in sales, and then the expenses to produce those sales, and what's left is what I can take home and live off of. So right there is probably the beginning point. Well, and then the next thing is, are you going to be able to sell that much? Who are you going to sell to? Why would they buy from you? And answer those kinds of questions to see if someone actually is going to help you reach those numbers of sales so that you can do it. So I think that's a real quick outline. On our website, we have something called Evaluating Your Business Idea, and it just allows you to plug those numbers in, and then at the bottom line says this is how much you got left over after all your expenses, and then you can make a decision on whether that's a good idea or not.
Okay.
One quick add to that, you need to be sure that that business fits you, your profile.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're a guy who likes to fry hamburgers, then a hamburger stand's a good one, but if you don't, wouldn't buy one. If you like to go to work every morning in a coat and tie, you need to find a business where you can wear a coat and tie. So it's also lifestyle.
Right.
And I think that's a really good place to start.
And I would say that you have to really be prepared to put your heart and soul into it. I think there's somebody who started a similar business to mine some years ago, and she had the idea, it was a franchise, and she had the idea that she was just going to come in and the money was just going to come rolling in, and it doesn't work that way. And people who think that business owners are just kind of 9 to 5, I mean, really and truly, in the early years of the business, I was working 7 days a week. And I was going in early and going home late, and it was just ongoing and ongoing. And I didn't mind it because I really loved what I did. But there are certain personal sacrifices that you give up, and there is that kind of, and you have to have that sense that you have to be able to deal with ambiguity. I think that's a big part of owning a business. You cannot, you know, you may hope that the numbers line up like that, but then what are you going to do if they don't? Yeah. What are you going to do when you have, in my business, you have, you know, 5 snow days and, you know, the income dries up for some,
right.
you know, that kind of thing. So,
okay.
But the passion is the most important thing, I think.
Right. Okay. Well, we could probably talk about this a lot longer, but I think we're out of time. So thanks to all 3 of you. I really appreciate the discussion, and thanks to all of you watching. Good night.